And so thank you very much to Beach Pottery. We can move that over. Very nice. And ladies and gentlemen, I've been waiting a long time for this interview. The city manager from Sanibel. She's going to get a big round of applause here from our artificial audience out there. Judy, I am not even going to try and say your last name because I will butcher it.
It's very easy. It's Zimomra, mom in the middle.
Yeah, that's really easy. But thank you very much. How are you?
I'm great.
Just by that introduction, I know I'm barely going to get a word in here edgeways. Right. So, welcome, and we're glad to have you on. That's probably all I'll get to say.
Thank you for coming to the dark side.
I wouldn't say that. But before we start your official questions, I want to thank you very much. When we lost our street superintendent a few months ago, who had been with the city for so many years, and the wonderful posts that you put up in recognition of Lance Luna. And, a lot of people, when the type of awards that Sanibel gets year after year about how beautiful our town is, and that it's really those working men and women who deserve the recognition and very seldom get it. So thank you for sharing that post. That was very
Appreciate
nice
you saying
of you.
That. So you're recently back from vacation.
Yes.
Well, so tell us about how your vacation was, where you went, and you're so great on social media, so we were following along with you. But
well, I had not had a vacation like many, many, many people here the last 17 months. So I had a family wedding in Ohio, and I drove up and took an opportunity to reflect on the beautiful countryside and do all the things you do on vacation, eat some good food and see some nice people, but mostly an opportunity to reunite with my family that we're all together for the wedding. So that was just fabulous.
And I just wanted to say, so you're originally from Ohio. You went to Ohio State University?
I did my grad work there, but all three of my degrees are in Ohio, yeah.
3 degrees. What are your degrees in?
My undergrad's from Kent State University in communication, and my master's in public finance and public administration at Ohio State. And then I have a Juris Doctorate degree from Capital University.
How's this football team going to do this year?
We always do good.
That's true. Doesn't matter who the coach is.
Even in a bad year, Ohio State has good football.
So you, like I mentioned before, you're super active on social media, which I love that as the city manager, you're active on social media. You don't really see that very often, but you're doing the ding darling stuff a lot. And you seem like you like to be around bugs and butterflies and things like that. So, and you're a photographer too, it seems like. So kind of tell us about how that kind of mixes into being the city manager, or why it's important for you to be doing things like that.
Well, my undergrad actually started as a photography major, and I started working for a newspaper when I was 15 as a photographer and a photojournalist, and a long, windy path that took me into public administration instead. But that idea of communication, and that is the area I studied as an undergrad, I think you can never over-communicate with the public, your friends, your neighbors, and, there's a lot of bad that comes out of social media, but I think it's also one more avenue to communicate both with your residents as well as with your, again, like I said, I have a very large extended family, so it's how we stay in touch as well. Out of all the posts I ever did when we had Hurricane Irma, we opened, a lot of people still did not have water and power back on the island. And so we opened the showers at the Sanibel Recreation Center, both for hot showers as well as phone chargers and a cooling center if you didn't have air conditioning. And to announce it, I came out of the shower with my hair wrapped up and a towel around me. And that's still the number one post of ever was coming out of the shower.
That's funny.
So that people really seem to, not making light of it, but trying to, really get the information out there.
And how important is that to have a bit of a sense of humor, to be able to communicate with people when you're in a position that's so serious most of the time?
Well, that doesn't mean everybody's going to agree on every point, but you hope to leave every discussion with a recognition that sometimes people have different opinions and everyone's giving their best. And we have just so many educated, well-meaning, generous, philanthropic citizens on Sanibel. It's hard to not have a good conversation, a good communication out there, but it's just been a wonderful 20 years. And if you think they communicate on social media, you should see our emails, because we get a high volume of emails as well. And I do my best to keep up on a daily basis with our email input.
So tell us how you got the job 20 years ago. Where were you doing at that time, and what made you? Well, this is a dumb question. What made you want to come to Sanibel to be the city manager?
Well, I had been a chief of staff for a large city up north, and that mayor decided not to run for office. And as chief of staff, your job goes, with that elected official. So I was looking, and the chief of police and the fire chief that I was working with there had just come back from a fishing trip here, and they said, "Don't you have a sunset picture of Sanibel on your desk? And you always said you wanted to be a city manager." And I'd worked in city manager form of government. And so I was looking, even though I was only in the first week of my search. But from the Sanibel side, they had 6 city managers in the 5 years before I started. So, which is not, it's a higher than the normal turnover, but it's a job where the average is usually 3 to 5 years tenure, and you can get a revolving door syndrome, sometimes. So it's like some marriages and partnerships. The chemistry has to be right. And sometimes the chemistry changes on other parties. You might have an election where, since I've been there, the election's never been, let's throw the bum out and get a new city manager, So, I come to work every day trying to do my best job. But they were looking for a city manager and I was looking for a job. So the two worked out.
Do you remember who interviewed you?
I definitely. The 5 city council members at the time.
Who was the mayor at the time?
Nola Tice.
Okay. Did you, as you're getting ready to retire, do you remember exactly the number of elected officials there were in that? Or approximately?
I know for sure 7 mayors. Okay. And of course, the longest tenured was our now county commissioner, Kevin Ruane. And every single day I worked with Kevin Ruane was just a pleasure and an honor. And I think an excellent partnership, and really enjoyed working with his leadership. And then in all of them, but his was just the longest while I was there, but just a stellar human being as well as elected official. And then over 15 or 16 city council members, but definitely 7 different mayors.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, now I think I was reading that when you moved here, was it the week of 9/11?
That's the week they called to offer me the position. And when they called me, I was actually sitting in the Ohio State. They called me on a Saturday. Council had a meeting on a Saturday after the interviews to decide who they were going to offer the position to. And I was sitting at a football game at Ohio State, and they called me there. And I was in the stadium, and they called me. They said, "We'd like to offer you the position. There's one caveat, and everybody probably doesn't know this, but by state law in Florida, you have to have your budget adopted by October 1st." And they called and said, "There's one issue. We don't have an adopted budget yet." And this was on September 9th. So could you come down and get a budget adopted? Okay.
I was going to say, did they tell you that because they didn't have money to offer you, or because they wanted you to do it?
Get done? They're like, "We're calling you, and you got and you're 20 days, and you're out of state. We need a." I said, "Well, I can fly down and get a budget." Now the city I was working with had a $1.3 billion budget, so doing a budget much smaller, I thought, we can get that done in 20 days.
And then, I'm sorry, was September 11th that Tuesday?
That was that Tuesday. Yeah, so I had taken off.
So you couldn't fly down.
No, exactly. And not only that, all the planes were down, and it was that era, just like at the beginning of COVID, where you weren't sure. Right. I mean, the stock market closed for a day or two, so you're like, should I take my stock certificates with me? Should I, what clothes?
Well,
what do I put in this?
Should I be moved? This would be I would be like, I don't know if this is a good time to make a big shift right now.
Right. And so it was, and everybody else was other focused appropriately. So, but that's when I moved down, and that's when I started.
Nice. So 20 years is a long time. How have you been able to maneuver the different politicians? It's such sometimes it could kind of be a political hardball kind of thing, because you never know when there's an election how things are going to change, how people think, and you're kind of in a groove, and then you have to kind of figure out who this new person is. So how were you able to maneuver that and do that for 20 years?
Well, a couple things. One is, personally, I've went into every job. If you're going to be in the public sector like this, realizing that at any given day, someone could come in and say, "This is your last day," and you just have to have that backup plan and be confident enough that if I had to go find other work, I could do it. So I've never went in every day worried about that. And then the second part is, I think there's many aspects of the Sanibel charter, which of course for a city, the charter would be for the state or national is your constitution. Mm-hmm. It lays out the duties and how the city's organized. On Sanibel, the council runs nonpartisan. They run without wards and districts, and they don't do get. It's one of the few cities in the state of Florida they receive zero compensation. So you tend, and to my experience, is all the council members run because they want to make the community a better place.
Right.
So if everybody starts on the same mission, we want to make the city a better place, and all that partisan activity is put aside, you already start, I think, with a leg up. And so for that, I say our Constitution and our community is very involved and kind of keeps everybody in City Hall in check.
And it's a strong manager situation in Sanibel too, right? Explain what that means for people that might not know.
It's the manager council form of government. So there's different forms of government you can have. Several years ago, for example, the city of Fort Myers transitioned to having a professional manager, but you still have a legislative body. And if you go to the charter of any city, you can see what duties and responsibilities sit with the city council. And then on the Sanibel charter, it specifically says the day-to-day operations are managed by the city manager. And it specifically even speaks in the charter that no council member can
talk to a staff member, right?
Work with the staff members, interfere with that day-to-day operations. And that's also provisions in my contract as well.
Yeah, that's a good idea, because you could be directing somebody, or any manager can be, and then a council member calls and tells them to do something different. The person that's working is in such a bad spot. What do they do? So
well, and
that
a big
makes sense.
part of that to succeed, though, is as the manager making certain you are getting that correct information very quickly to those elected officials when they need it.
Here's what's going on.
And then we have always on Sanibel during my tenure, one of the basic tenets I have followed is that all the council and all the elected officials should get all the same information. So if council member A says, I'd like to see a 5-year analysis of traffic accidents, I send it out to all and say, a council member asked for this. So we don't get that, I got you at a council meeting. You don't have surprises, and everybody's working off that same facts.
Why do you think Sanibel doesn't have any homeless? Or maybe they do.
I was going to say that's not true.
Oh,
We've actually had some experiences in my tenure there. It's something that we address and have worked on. But when you have a climate where people think you can stay year round, and you have an area where people have, I've dealt with the homeless issue in some northern cities, and, there's a certain factor that comes in with the weather, et cetera, that here, we've had people in my tenure, we've had issues where people have made a single person, not a group of people, temporary housing at a public beach, or someone living out of their van at somewhere. We've had somebody living off of a bench for a while. And we have invested a lot of money into restrooms. And we had a time where one person was using our public restroom as basically their home.
What did you find was the best way to deal with that? Because it's certainly a tough situation.
We deal with it very much individually. I'd tell you the best outcome we had a person that was living next to a dumpster on Sanibel. And in our interactions with them, and we always bring in the social services, we found out the person actually was a veteran of the U.S. Navy and had never, ever had accessed his benefits. We have a doctor who lives on the island who volunteers over at the VA in Cape Coral, got him very involved. And the person found out he was actually eligible for a back payment from the Veterans Administration. He was very much in need of some medical attention. And probably one of the highlights of my career is he came back about 2 years later once and found me and thanked me for
That's amazing.
What we were able to do. And he actually still to this day lives in our public housing program on Sanibel.
Oh, so you have public housing over there. Can you tell us about how that came about?
We have a below market rate housing program. It's very much supported by the community. The city contracts with a nonprofit, Community Housing Resources, and our current vice mayor actually was the long-term board director, but the city's invested over the years significant funds as well as citizens.
Now, you talked about that being, a highlight of your career. What are some of the other, highlights? And then, what have been some of the challenges? 20 years is a long time to try to distill it down, but do your best.
Well, I'd tell you, any given time, there's a couple things about Sanibel that are unique, and every city is a dot somewhere on that big world globe. Every city is unique. Everybody, and the one thing every city thinks
It's
is
unique.
that they're unique,
Yeah.
and that their people are unique in their business, and they all are. But Sanibel has an extra layer, and that's that we happen to be a world-class destination. There's 7 billion plus people in the world. If they all wanted to come to Sanibel, and some days in season, it seems like they all are on the same day. So there's challenges that come out of being a world-class destination. But I do believe, in not just me, not just our elected officials, but again, our public documents, our city charter and our codes, they're all about how do we protect the natural environment on Sanibel. And some people think, even sometimes when elected officials first get elected, they think it's about balance on Sanibel. How do we balance the human interaction with the natural environment? But on Sanibel, our Sanibel plan, which is another name for our comprehensive plan, on Sanibel, the pinnacle is the natural environment. And what we say is that is what we're protecting most.
Mm-hmm.
And everything else becomes secondary. So that has really stood us well. So on a day-to-day basis, back on, what's the highlight? The highlight, I think, is taking a community that protects the environment first, is a world-class destination, but yet provide what we believe is the highest quality, most efficient tax level for a great place to live. I mean, it's the quality of life issues. We are usually the 3rd or 4th safest city in the state of Florida any given year, crime-wise. We have excellent schools on Sanibel, but it's the things we do. When I first arrived in Sanibel, we did not have a single playground on Sanibel.
No way.
No playground. Wow. And we've obtained some grants and built one up at the rec center and things. So just some little things. When I ride around the island and say, what's different? Where we've been able to we had some bike paths when we came, but we did not have the bike path network we do now, et cetera. Yeah. So it's what our number one responsibility, besides protecting that natural environment, is how do we become a great town to live, even though we are a world-class destination. So that's where we put our emphasis at City Hall.
You mentioned the safest place. You have your own police department. How big is the police department, and at what year did it come in to?
That was one of the 2 main reasons the city incorporated, was to have their own police department. It's been my honor to work with 4 different chiefs of police. All 4 of them came from within our ranks. Our current chief is excellent, has been the previous one since I've been there and the ones I've appointed. But our current chief has been with the city for over 26 years. We have a strong emphasis on what, sometimes is a buzzword in the industry of community policing.
Yep.
And we use techniques such as visibility and patrolling specific areas, what's called area checks on their reports, as a way to have a presence to try to minimize, crime issues. Because I do have people occasionally who say, Sanibel's so safe, do we really need a police department? And I say, you don't understand.
That's why
we're so safe because we have a very good police department. And of course, they're very, very much in the point when we do have an evacuation or a near evacuation due to hurricanes, et cetera. Our police department is very skilled in all of those areas.
How big is the police department? How many officers?
It fluctuates also because of season, and we have a very high percentage of civilian employees. If you've ever come to Sanibel and you enter during any type of traffic, you'll see traffic aides, but they are not armed, and they have radios. They're part of the police department, but they're civilian employees. So we typically lately been running 26 officers, which when you open,
I never would have guessed that many.
No, but 7 days a week, and then there's a day someone's off, and you have one who's a school.
I just think we hadn't really done the math of what
and
that
how many full-time.
But we're programmed for 30. So to run, we're budgeted this year for 26. But if we are going to cover all of our services, we really would have 30 officers. And now we also occasionally get some part-time. We augment it in season, but you can't just bring people on, train them, and turn them back out. You really have to have a trained.
And what's the full-time population?
Well, the last census, it was just over 6,000.
6,000.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. But if there's a head in every bed, so if every condo's full, if you're building the sewer plant, you build it for 32,000.
Wow.
Now then in season, it's not uncommon to get another 3,000 cars on top of those 32,000 people who have driven on the island to,
So
enjoy the day.
I have been there recently during that time, and I appreciated the traffic, the folks helping with traffic, but it's there's just no easy way.
It's ride your bike is the easiest way to do it.
It's a couple hours. It took a
20,
while.
So 26 officers, 6,000 people.
We're posing for pictures right now.
Sorry. I think the population down here is like 6,000 too. So you can see the struggles with not having a police department or talking about the community policing that Fort Myers Beach is going through.
And you need the number of resources and officers. But I'd also say a big part of it, and again, I've worked in a very high management position in very large cities with some very serious crime, but it's the old theory that you have to stop it before it spreads, and it's how you deploy. It's not about how many officers, that's a big part of it, but it's how you deploy them, how you train them, what you set as the priorities. Road patrol. I'll give you another example. When I arrived with the city, we had a motorcycle detail, but we had no beach patrol. We no longer have motorcycles. We no longer send officers to training for motorcycle, but we have a very aggressive beach patrol where we have officers on the beach.
So let's talk about turtles.
Sure. That's one of the things our police officers do when they're out with beach patrol is
arrest turtles.
No, they
protect them.
But in my tenure, we've arrested at least once, if not twice, someone for stealing turtle eggs.
Yep.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
What ding dong would do that?
Somebody who wanted to make turtle soup, or
really?
Turtles are a very, very precious commodity now, and a very much
there's
an
like
underground
a black market.
There's a very active black market, particularly in Florida, and so some people actually steal turtle eggs and then incubate them for the turtle,
or come and just take the turtles off the island.
Yes, there's been some federal arrests in this region about turtle theft.
So how do you guys deal with the lighting situation? I have a feeling that your lights probably aren't as close to the beach, or maybe they are, than we had, because but Fort Myers Beach is trying to figure out the proper lighting for safety and for the turtles. And so how do you guys deal with that?
Well, the city of Sanibel has a very aggressive lighting program. We're one of the few designated dark sky communities in the United States. We meet the standards for being a dark sky community. And if you ever drove over Sanibel at night, or put a drone up, you'd see how dark our community is. And of course, part of that is because over 70% of our land is conservation land. Mm-hmm. So in those areas, be it owned by the federal government, the city has some conservation land, and then some private sector with the Conservation Foundation. Those areas are not lit at all. So that takes 70% is done. And then in the residential areas, we have some very specific lighting requirements. Some of it's in place all year round for the turtles about what has to be turned off, etc. And then some of it is in place year round. We have very strict requirements when properties are originally constructed. Mm-hmm. It has to meet the dark sky compliance as far as the cutoff fixtures, what can be allowed, and then the Conservation Foundation and the city does tours at night before turtle season. So if we see a facility that some maintenance person put a non-compliant light up by accident last year or something, we get a hold of them before turtle season to make sure we do that. And then the city tries to be a model. We put up a beautiful American flag that we had a cell phone tower that was going to be installed, and people were concerned it was going to be ugly. So we worked with the phone company and had it the carrier and made it into a flag. And then as soon as the flag went up, it's illuminated 24/7. Everybody realized that could be a turtle deterrent. So during turtle season, all that comes off and we take the flag down. So, we try to be a model of that.
Is it all amber lighting?
It's not all amber, but it's all turtle compliant. But the biggest factor you can do, what we have found, is what you call cutoff fixtures. Okay. So you can have the illumination going down, but they usually look like a box, but they can be right. So the light bulb cannot extend below the fixture.
Got it. And so their shielding works.
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Got it.
Because it's about the light not going off or going towards the beach. So
you guys have like the community house and SCCF and
Ding
Darling and
the Bailey's.
Do you make it a point to hang out at Ding Darling at least once a week? And you seem like you're finding something different to take a picture of every time you're there.
Well, I personally, from last year, I went into my own personal lockdown on March 3rd. The first briefing we had with the county emergency management center about the pandemic was on March 3rd. And that was just a day or two after the first case was detected in the cruise ships in Miami. There had been the cases in California at that point. And I came back and I thought, this could be bad. So I did a couple things personally to make sure things I didn't have to worry about. I cleared my calendar, briefed council. And from that date, March 3rd till June 20th of last year, I found myself working about 19, 18 hours. I was there most nights till midnight, 7 days a week. I try to do every city email, response. And again, being a world-class destination, we're trying to prioritize our residents, but the brides who had canceled weddings and the family reunions and I can get a flight, but I can't get this. And people were saying, if I came down, can I get into my home? Why are you allowing people to come? Why aren't you allowing people to come? So just a meat grinder of that, as well as we're an employer. So we're trying to push out policies for our employees. Are we going to let people work from home, not work from home? Who can work from home? And what if someone becomes positive in the workplace? How soon can they come back? And working through all those issues. So, and then I was in usually by 5 at the latest. So I was getting about 4 hours sleep. And on June 20th, of course, is always the longest day of the year, sunrise. And I said, I've got to get out behind this desk. And I said, I haven't been to Ding Darling for at least a year or two. So I drove over there. And at that time, they, the feds had lifted all the gates and you could just drive in on the pit. And I drove in and nobody else was in there. And it was the most gorgeous, glorious sunset. I gotta get over here.
I gotta get out more often, right? Yeah.
So I really made a goal saying, even if I have to go back to the office for several hours in the evening, I have got to get out and get some fresh air and breathe the air and stretch my legs and arms because
be away from all that overstimulation.
Exactly. Because I've done hurricanes, I've done blizzards, I've done tornadoes, and meaning actual direct hits. And you can do that, at least I can, still for say 4 or 5 days. You cannot. I found it unsustainable for 4 months.
Yeah.
So just really. So then I just started saying, well, that's beautiful, and I'll post it, and people seem to respond.
Oh, they love it. They love it.
Yeah. And then I had a cousin's cousin write to me just recently and say, I just want you to know our pastor forwards, this is in Newark, Ohio, our pastor forwards your photos every day to the entire congregation as an inspiration. I'm like, oh, that's a burden.
Do you feel like the city, it's always easy to look back, and I'm sure you guys talk about it, how the city dealt with COVID? How do you feel like you guys did?
Well, I feel like we were a ship in just the choppy waters, and now we just came into the dock. So, we have, and the community has been extremely supportive. Again, we get a lot of people with opinions on every aspect of operating the city, and our council and our city hall administrative staff embraces those. So as you can imagine, during COVID, we had a lot of input, and I don't think everybody agreed with every decision, but in the long run, I think the community felt the city council made some very hard decisions, but they were very good. And one of the ones was that I think the community particularly responded to was when all of us in Southwest Florida were having these challenges about the beaches on the other coast being closed and getting this onslaught of visitors. Because of the physical layout of our beaches, we were able to keep the beaches open but close our parking lots. Yeah. So people who could still bike to their beach, they could walk to their beach. So we did not have to do the aggressive close the beach and be policing that. But we were able to do a hard close on our parking lots.
The mask mandate on Sanibel, it seemed to me like if there was one city that was really behind it, because, a lot of people had opinions on the mask, it was Sanibel. It seemed like there was one meeting that I think you had to interrupt because the governor was speaking during COVID, but the comments were just rapid fire. And I think that might even be in a time where people could call in their comments, and it was almost like 90% of the people said, yeah, even the business is right.
At least 90%. And it reflects our community.
It's when we went over there, I remember how much we commented on how everybody was following the rule.
And the first thing you do when you get over the bridge is you see all the sign, put your mask on.
And I mean, I'd say when it comes to turtle lighting, litter, paper straw, some of the, we have some laws that other people think are a little quirky, mostly based to protect the environment. The people in stand-up, they reflect the values of the community. So it's not like people come and go, oh, I can't believe we are not allowed to feed the wildlife. No, we want to protect the wildlife, and you do that best by not feeding them. So we have a high compliance. Now, one of the things we put a high priority on is the education component as well. So that people understand what the rules are. And we always say when it comes to code enforcement, law enforcement, our number one goal is compliance. We're not, sometimes somebody will write and go, well, you're probably glad you got that fine. We only fine someone as a very, very last resort if we cannot get compliance after many, many efforts. So we do not have a major revenue stream of parking fines, speeding tickets, or any kind of code enforcement. That is a minuscule portion of our budget.
Right. So we were talking around earlier today. I don't even know if any of this is true because I hadn't heard it, that somebody's considering raising the prices on the bridge in Cape Coral to $8 and on Sanibel to some. Did you hear anything about that?
That would be news to me.
Okay,
but the county commissioners just at their last meeting on June 15th adopted the staff recommendations for fees and going forward and how they're going to man the toll booths and not where they're going to and things. So that was just adopted this last meeting, and I was not aware of any fee increase in there.
So it's still $100 to get over the bridge every day, or some, no, I mean it's $5.
$6. Right.
The thing that scares me about the bridge is not the $5 because is it $6?
Yeah,
because I ride my bike.
But if you have a transponder, you get a discount.
I ride my bike over, but it's so close to the edge. It's frightening to me. I'm afraid of heights, and it's like I wish that thing was like a brick wall that you couldn't see over. But anyway, that's just a personal thing.
There had been, since it opened, there was one fatality, and it was a car that came left to center and hit a biker. And
she worked for us.
She worked for us. She was a friend of ours. It was really
crazy.
Terrible case. And so, the design was one of significant public input, both by Sanibel and the county, but it's a beautiful facility.
Oh yeah.
And I didn't mean the bike lane.
No,
it's huge. A big
it's
bike
huge.
lane.
No, it's huge. I'm just afraid of cats. I'm afraid of the heights.
He makes me ride on the outside so he can stay on the inside and not worry about it.
So, what are you going to miss? About the job.
Yeah, I'm going to miss, but I hope to quickly have it replaced is just the constant, and I'd have to say the last, 17 months has kind of been dog years in city management. So I'm hoping to have a little more free time, go to some farmers markets and, just do the things that old ladies like to do.
Do you know any old ladies?
Darling, even more, right?
Exactly.
So
do some volunteer work.
Right.
You're planning to stay on the island?
I've made no plan. We have been so busy that in my contract, the notice requirement was way shorter than what I gave because I wanted to give time for an adequate transition. I really love Sanibel and want to make sure the council has the time to, select who will be there next. And anything I can do to help with that process, I'm certainly prepared to do it. And I plan on no other, major vacations. I'm going to take a couple days here and there for some personal business, but I plan to be there till the end. I'm not a lame duck and in the chair and working until we get the budget passed. And one reason I picked the date I did was so we can get a budget adopted.
Yeah. And the council met earlier this week to talk about search committees. Did they pick one?
They did.
Okay, so the process starts now.
And the firm received a notice to proceed, so that process is started.
Okay, and you think somebody will be in place by what's
That'll
the date they're shooting?
Okay,
yeah. Well, it's got to be a dream job too. I mean, to come down and live on Sanibel but it's got to be like you've been there for 20 years. How could that? You can't top that. Do you know any other town manager, city manager that's lasted 20 years?
Well, nationally, there are some, and there have been some other ones in Florida, but I received an award at my 35th and from the International Association. And what's really different, there's very few people who've been as many years because of many local governments. You can retire after 30 years. Right. So once I hit 35, the group nationally is much smaller. But there was only 2 women, and
wow.
There was an article written when I hit 35 years in the field, and my nieces who are in their 20s, they go, it's unusual for women to be city managers. Like, well, not so much now, but like they never even, because
Right.
their whole life I've been doing this work, so they didn't even real. I go, oh no, it was a very small club 40 years ago
Right,
of women
right.
managers and women city managers. So, but in Southwest Florida, I know at least from Key West to Tampa, I'm by far the longest tenured city or county manager.
What's going to be the biggest challenge, if any, for Sanibel next few years?
Just keeping Sanibel. That's just a daily, I worked in a city with a lot of urban decay that was trying to come back and has to a much degree came back. And every day you are fighting decay, some aspect, crime, schools, education, outward migration. On Sanibel, it's the opposite. Every day you're fighting being overloved, and all that brings with it. So there was an excellent book several years ago, Overbooked, about just how world travel, the complications it creates everywhere once people find out a place and want to go there. And I mean, we're on so many lists of places to see.
Best
before.
beaches
Beaches, a bucket list of wherever.
Shelling
and weddings and family vacation and best sunset, and which is all great. But it just drives, as our region and our area grows, which is great. And Sanibel's always had a red carpet out and a welcome sign, is managing and all that and keeping Sanibel.
So translation is don't muck it up, right?
Keep a good thing going.
Is there anything that as you depart, you're like, that's one thing I really wish I could have dragged across the finish line?
Oh, I personally have a little habit of every night. As they always say, do your gratitude, and I try to do that. But I do a self-reflection every evening, like what could I done better today, and what could I do better tomorrow, and what should be at the top of the list. So I have a day I have 20 years of things I could have done better.
Stop. Well, we appreciate you coming on. Anything else you want to share that we might have missed? I mean, we could talk to you for
It's
hours.
been a wonderful experience, and thank you. I know it took a while to get our calendars coordinated to get on here, and I literally was, it just seems like 20 years went by in a flash, and mostly because of the great people I've worked with on Sanibel.
And yet the communication that you have with, always responsive. Every time I send something, trying not to be a nag. You've always been helpful, even though that's not our main gig. We love Sanibel, and so I want to thank you for that. You explained the rules over there, and then in a way that made us understand what we needed to do, and so we appreciate all that. And good luck with everything. Thanks for your 20 years, and have some fun. Damn it.
And the last thing is for anybody out there who's a father,
Yes.
Happy Father's Day weekend. It's typically the busiest day of the year on Sanibel the beaches. A lot of people think it's spring break or whatever, but in Florida, a lot of local dads end up at the beach
and the golf courses. I would imagine. Yeah.
And so we are a major destination. We've been doing a lot of work to get ready for tomorrow at our beaches, and we're going to have all the staff, all hands on deck, including myself. And so, happy Father's Day to everybody if you're on Sanibel, wherever you are.
Thank you, Judy, for coming on so much. Have a great weekend. Thanks a lot. This is Judy Zimomra, everybody, from Sanibel. 20 years as the city manager. I'll take care of this, dear, if you want to. And we wish her the best of luck moving forward with her retirement. And that was awesome to have her on. We've been working for a while to try and have her on, and that was great. Love having her on here. And we have movie trivia coming up, folks, before we let you go.